Okay, hi everybody. Thank you all for coming, and thank you class for being here. Good to see you again. We have some visitors with us today that we're very honored to be present with, and that is Meredith Monk and Louise Steinman. And I'm going to do a brief introduction, and I'm reading it, so please excuse me. I want to make sure I hit all the points. So for this class, we've been studying the history of performance art, of which there are many histories. In today's lecture, we're calling this Voice, Body, and Embodied Practice. As we continue our understanding of the history of performance art, we're very fortunate to have these very two special guests joining us for this talk. Legendary interdisciplinary artist Meredith Monk, and as I mentioned, Louise Steinman. Louise will be in conversation with Meredith, focusing on Meredith's use of body, voice, and movement as central elements to her interdisciplinary performance practice. Meredith is a composer, singer, director, choreographer, and filmmaker whose work blends music, movement, theater, and visual imagery. Emerging from the experimental art scene of the 60s, she became widely known as a pioneer of what is known today as extended vocal technique. Using the voice as a full expressive instrument beyond traditional singing. For more than 6 decades, her interdisciplinary performances have been presented around the world and have had profound influence on contemporary performance, experimental music, and interdisciplinary art. Joining her in this conversation today is a dear friend, Louise Steinman, a writer, interdisciplinary artist, and literary curator whose works explore storytelling, embodiment, and performance. She is the author of The Knowing Body, the artist as storyteller in contemporary performance, which examines how contemporary artists use the body as a source of knowledge and narrative in performance. Louise has also written about Meredith's work, including essays for a catalog of Meredith's retrospective in Germany, and I'm not going to pronounce the museum, maybe you could. Okay. It's Haus der Kunst in Munich. She founded and curated Aloud, which was a literary performance series at the Los Angeles downtown public library when it first opened, correct? So first opened, she was there. And has also served as a curator for Penn World Voices Festival. So, with that, we're very honored and beyond honored to have both of you here and to do this fabulous conversation. I'm here when you need something, and this is your microphone. I'm passing it off to Louise.
I need a microphone. Thank you so much, Deb. Welcome, everyone. This is a real treat for me to be with Meredith and to have this long association with Deb. Met Meredith at Europa in 1976, and it certainly changed my life in all kinds of ways. So, since we're thinking about the body, I wanted to start by just asking you, what does the word embodied mean to you? How do you think of it?
I think it's just being present to the moment, being fully present to the moment without the narrator talking in your mind about your experience. You're just there.
You're there with it.
Period.
And that's quality. I mean, you started as a very young, exploring movement. With Dalcroze Eurythmics, right? That was your first kind of training in
music and movement.
In music and in movement.
Yeah.
And coming to the idea of the voice as an integral part of that body, tell us a little bit about the steps towards getting to the place where you really felt like the voice could do anything that it was such an intrinsic part of the body.
Well, I'm the fourth generation singer in my family. My mother was the original Muriel Cigar on the radio. She did commercials. Bluebonnet Margarine. I mean, these products don't exist anymore because this is like in the days of the dinosaurs. But so music was something that was just like breathing to me. My grandfather had been a bass baritone from Russia, and apparently his father was a cantor in Russia. So singing was just like, so natural. Like it was really like breathing, and it was. I sang back phrases very early before I talked. So I think it was just some kind of. It was an inevitability that was going to be the center of my work. But I was very, very lucky to do Dalcroze Eurythmics, which is a wonderful, I don't know if all of you know what it is, it's a fantastic way that children learn music through the body. And so it's very integrated. So, if you were learning a do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, it would be with your arms, so that you also have spaces involved. And I think the other kids were more comfortable physically, and they were learning music, but I had physical limitations, and I was very comfortable with the music, so I was learning my body. And so the integration of those two things, music, the voice, and the body, was something that I just took for granted over the years, and I never realized how much I was influenced by that until I started working on my opera atlas for Houston Grand Opera, and I was working with classically trained singers, because my original ensemble were more people that came from dance, but they also were really good singers. So this thing of the kinetic voice was something that they grew up with my language of singing. But then when it was people that came from the more classical training, they didn't have the rhythmic articulation that we have, and they were not used to using their bodies with, they were used to planting themselves in the sweet spot in an opera hall and then doing their arias. So, to be moving and singing at the same time was a new concept for them. And I would do these rhythmic patterns, and then I would come back to the big one of the cycle, and they would go, "How are you doing that, Meredith?" And I said, "I have no idea, it's completely intuitive for me." And they said, "It's that Dalcroze training." So, and also Dalcroze was such an interesting, that was the late 19th century when there were a lot of people that were trying for utopian kind of societies before the 20th century. He was very close with Laban, von Laban, who invented Laban notation. And there were all these spirits that were really coming together. Mary Wigman studied with Dalcroze. Then it went on to Doris Humphrey's teacher. I mean, it just goes on, these strange branches that I'm finding out more about as I go on in my life.
So that's one lineage, it's like a movement lineage.
Movement and music lineage.
But you didn't become an opera singer, you didn't become a radio singer, you had these strong influences.
Yeah.
When did you start realizing that you had some other way of exploring the voice?
Well, at Sarah Lawrence, I was earning part of my way through singing and playing the guitar at children's birthday parties, but usually I ended up being the babysitter, but I did my folk singing for the children. And then I was also in the voice department as well as the dance department. So I was studying leader, I was in the opera workshop, and I was making pieces that were already movement-based, but really using a little bit of vocal work within them, and objects and light, and this idea of weaving these elements together. And then when I came to New York, I was doing pieces more in galleries that were more gesturally oriented and very cinematic in a way. But I was missing singing, in them. And so I sat down at the piano and started doing my regular vocalizing and Western European vocalizing. And then I realized in a flash that the voice could be a language in itself, and that it could be like the body. It could be like a spine. It could wave like a spine. It could jump. It could turn. It could fall. It could have a gamut of emotion within it. I could make a laughing song, a crying song, and songs between the words that we have for emotions. It could have masculine and feminine and in between it.
It could have
animal, vegetable, mineral.
Yeah,
it could
exactly.
have landscapes. It could have characters. And so it was, and I had already done my pieces that were more, as I said, gesturally based, more interdisciplinary, but I was looking for that emotional center. And then I realized that's it. You know, like exploring my voice as an instrument is going to be the heart of my work. And so it developed from that moment.
So you took this question about the voice, this investigation of the voice, and it's post-graduation, post-Sarah Lawrence in New York, and it's downtown, and the happenings are happening.
Yeah.
And it's cheap to live in New York. There's a lot of exciting things. So what happened when you started mixing like with Dick Higgins and other artists? I think that's kind of what we're aiming towards getting to, 60 millimeter earrings, right? Because didn't it come out of that period?
It was, 60 millimeter earrings was it was like the fall of the third year I was in New York. The first year was kind of the end of the happenings movement, but I was asked to be in a lot of happenings because people knew that I could use different modes of performing, you know, that I could sing, I could move, I could act, you know, and they wanted that kind of gamut. But it's also what I was thinking about in my own work.
Right.
So my own work was always the top priority for me, but I did enjoy working particularly with Dick Higgins because he was really a wonderful musician in his own right and playwright
And a poet.
but then I used him also as a mover in my work. And he was quite a substantial guy. You know, so I was working with people with very different body types. And I think that we just had a kind of, what would I say, meeting of the minds as far as means is concerned, but our sensibilities were very different. Because I was very theatrical, you know, and they were very anti-theatrical.
Right.
Yeah.
But you also went on using, I've always loved about your work that you used people who didn't have just dancer bodies. I mean, that you had such different shapes. You had people in early works that were calligraphers, and you know, they came from all kinds of disciplines in the work, which was very different from what dance companies were doing.
Well, you know, it was such a relief because when I came to New York, it was still that you had to have a certain kind of body, which I did not have. But you know, I was talking to Alan about Lucas Hoving, who was this incredible modern dancer, you know, from the tradition of modern dance. And I remember I made a piece called Break for the Washington Square Galleries, which was a solo. I was trying to figure out how do I make a solo that's cut like a film, you know, that I can go from one image to another as a soloist. So it had these sharp changes of emotion and sharp changes of dynamic. And I used this, I was also always interested in the site-specific idea. And I auditioned for this young choreographers concert. And Lucas Hoving, coming from that, you know, it was pretty tight, you know, that modern dance. You had to look this certain way, you had to da-da-da-da-da. And the hippie thing hadn't come in, like it hadn't opened up completely by that point. And I remember I did this piece in the audition, and he said, "Who are you?" And I was like, "Well, I just graduated from Sarah Lawrence, you know, and Bessie was my teacher," and he was like, "You are compelling. I couldn't take my eyes off you." And then it turned out I didn't do the piece in that concert because I had already done it in New York. I did another piece, and then he just became like this, you know, like an angel in my life. So, you know, I still have a nostalgic feeling for the modern dance tradition, you know, in a way.
Sure.
But I also wanted to do everything in my power to break it down and do anything that was a rule, I was going to do the opposite.
So maybe having the non-dancers was also breaking the rule.
Definitely.
I mean, we hadn't gotten yet to Yvonne Rand. I mean, it was the same time. Yvonne Rainer, I mean, in terms of, I was thinking about Yvonne Rand too, the Buddhist teacher. No, of just everyday movement, but this was beyond everyday movement. These were people, some of whom were movers, some of whom were not movers.
Yeah. I think Yvonne, I mean, she was also breaking down those kinds of, what would I say, the hierarchy of technique, but she wasn't necessarily using people with very different body types and people that had not grown up with movement. They were movers who were giving up that technical way of thinking about things. I mean, at least in her early work, they were all really good movers. Although, I mean, something like the sculptors, like Robert Morris's dance pieces, I thought they were some of the best dance pieces I ever saw in my life. So, you know, I felt that I was really inspired by this idea of kind of breaking through the boundaries of what you think an art form is, because I feel that if you're a developed artist in any medium, then you're going to come in a new way to another medium and find your own way, again, and in a way it's not the rules of that medium, but you might find something that the people that grew up in the conservatory would never find.
That's so true, and I think
You have to
that's,
just develop yourself, your sensibility, and if you develop yourself in one art form and you go to another art form, but you're clear about what you have to say, you might find something that people that came up in that other art form won't know.
I love that concept, and I think it's a great segue. Deb, if you could put on 16 millimeter earrings, because this was really, I mean,
This was a breakthrough.
This was
piece
a
for me.
breakthrough piece, so maybe we could see why. We could talk- I mean, it's often been called a prototype for interdisciplinary art.
Could we just go full screen though, Deborah?
Yes,
Is
yes,
it
yes.
possible? Thank you. This is just this was a 30-minute solo. It was the first piece that I really did use my voice all the way through as a score, and it was the first piece that I used film. And there were a lot of people that were working with film, but they would kind of project it on the back wall and people would dance around. But I wanted to use it more as like a sculptural element. So it was projected on my face at one point. It was projected on a large screen. It was projected on a table. So it was kind of using the whole space as a canvas with film as a poetic level of it, so that you could see, for example, in live performance, you can't really get close-ups. So I wanted, scale. I was working a lot with scale.
Which you've continued to do all through the career.
So quick question.
Yes.
Was it called 16 millimeter?
60 millimeter earrings. I actually made some earrings out of 60 millimeter film.
I was wondering what the relationship was with the idea of earrings. And I was thinking a bit more of like the film is kind of dangling all around you too. Like a preposition.
I don't think anything's dangling.
Is this the video clip? We're looking for the video.
It's a video clip.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay, good.
this is right.
Okay, good.
I just want to say one other thing. So I think this idea of transformation came a lot in this piece. It was very hypnotic, and it was a little like I was Alfred Hitchcock. I don't know if all of you know his methodology. Alfred Hitchcock would plan every last thing out before he ever shot, and then shooting the film was really boring to him. And this is very in opposition to the way I work now, which is almost the opposite, but I was living that piece. And I sort of, like performing it was, I'd already made the piece, before I got on stage. Now it's very different. I'm very interested in the performer as a source, as a human, as a source of an example of what humanity can be. Yeah.
So we ready? I just want to clarify for the students, when you guys were talking about Dick Higgins, so for class, he was part of Fluxus. So as we were talking about Fluxus.
Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Just wanted to know that reference because that's what was inspiring you in going from.
Well, it didn't inspire me. It just was that we had a lot in common, and yet we were a very different generation. I was a generation younger than they were. They were very welcoming to me, and I think that they were very encouraging about my width, the way that I thought wide. And so they understood what I did, but I really don't think they were a direct inspiration, because in a way I was almost doing the opposite.
Right, they were doing events and you were doing more embodied.
I was doing more very carefully constructed, poetic performance.
Okay, so I will play. I'm going to turn the lights down, everyone, so don't.
Yeah, I think you referred to this also as like it was a poetry of the senses.
which show fundamentally different. There are certain areas of the surface which show fundamentally different. There are certain areas of the surface which show fundamentally different. There are certain areas of the surface which show fundamentally different. There are certain areas of the surface which show fundamentally different. There are certain areas of the surface which show fundamentally different. There are certain areas of the surface which show fundamentally different. There are certain areas of the surface which show fundamentally different. There are certain areas of the surface which show fundamentally different. There are certain areas of the surface which show fundamentally different. There are certain areas of the surface which show fundamentally different. There are certain areas of the surface which show fundamentally different. There are certain areas of the surface which show fundamentally different. There are certain areas of the surface which show fundamentally different. There are certain areas of the surface which show fundamentally different.
On a big screen.
Yeah.
Beautiful on the screen.
Yeah, tell us about the way you're working with color and it,
I was very inspired by the visual artists, the way that they worked, what I would say, in such a plastic way with materials. I don't mean plastic as in plastic, but with plasticity. And so I was really working like a painter in a way in this piece, like very visually, thinking about texture. And for example, I was saying to Louise, the different layers, I thought of it as like a poetry of the senses, this piece. So it was, the breakthrough was that finally these ideas came together in a form.
you remember where the flame came from?
Well, I was thinking about fire elements, and I was thinking about, so I dyed my hair red for the piece, and then I wore that red wig at a certain point, and then those paper flames behind me. And then the last image is of, which was on a huge screen, I was in a trunk. I mean, it's hard to describe this, but I was in a trunk that was in like a room that had two white chairs. And on the screen behind me was exactly like the miniature version of that room that I made out of balsa wood with a doll. And I was in the trunk, and I took all my clothes off in the trunk. This was the 60s, kids. And I was not arrested. And I opened up the trunk and stood up, and the flames, after this doll had burned, it was almost like an effigy. The doll had burned, and the little room had burned, and then the whole screen was flames. And then I stood up just sideways, so it was not, you were seeing the side of my body, and the flames were projected on my body. And it was very much like the image of a phoenix kind of coming back to life. And I was singing, I sat on the trunk before I went into the trunk, and I sang Green Sleeves in a cappella, because that was also, I was also bringing together in a way, it was like very much a ritual of a young woman coming into her life. So I felt that I could use things from my life. So my folk music, which was singing Green Sleeves, was part of that. And then there was a tape of me singing with the guitar during that whole sequence.
But
And
that's
the
part
end
of the
piece.
revelation of this piece, is that you could use everything. You could take things from any part of your life.
Yeah, reading, or,
Right.
that was a big revelation, that
Yeah.
anything was possible to use, not as, and bye, guys. Not as like an end in itself, as like, oh, I'm Meredith, or autobiography, because some of that work is just so indulgent I can't handle it. But much more that one can use any resource from their life, and then of course it has to be transformed into a piece that's going to be universal for other people.
Right.
That's the real trick.
That is the real trick.
Yeah, because I think a lot of what happened became performance art, became people. Not that confessional is not an interesting form, but you have to be able to also pull the lens back to make, if you're making a confessional form, you have to be able to pull your lens back and make it that it's legible for other human beings to get something out. It's not enough to just, you know what I'm saying?
Yes. I think we have an idea of what that performance art might look like.
Yeah.
So many things to talk about. When there was a period of time, I mean, this piece has its own landscape. You've done pieces that are very referring to history, like you are a student of history as well.
Yes.
I mean, I know Corey really well because I was in the chorus, and that's Meredith's kind of one of her masterworks about World War II, in which she is kind of the central figure of the piece. As a child who talk about embodiment, you are embodying the experience of these disparate experiences that are happening around the world. And
I was a sick child.
and you were a sick
So
child.
the first thing that you hear in the darkness is, I don't feel well, I don't feel well. It's my eyes, it's my eyes, it's my hands, it's my hands. It's this whole litany. And then her illness becomes a kind of metaphor for the world. And you first see, the first movement is called Lullaby, and you see somebody who probably is her mother. You see like a couple in Europe, these very intellectual, they could be professors. You see a biblical couple, and you see three women who are like Rosie the Riveters at a table. And that's kind of the environment, and little by little the darkness starts seeping in. And then her illness becomes kind of a metaphor of the world, of that darkness of the world. And I started with World War II for a lot of reasons, but it really is a meditation on war. Ping Chong did a marvelous job as a dictator, so we did not do a Hitler dictator. We just did dictator as an archetypal figure.
There's also an archetypal figure, a kind of nightmare mother of a radio
I think
singer.
her more as the messenger. We thought of her more.
But she is the radio. She's
a
also
radio singer. She's kind of the
Right.
Mercury character.
Right.
Because I was thinking a lot in those days, how did people communicate? They didn't have TikTok, they didn't have the internet, they didn't have telephones. Oh, they had telephones, but really the way you got the news was through the radio. And so I was thinking of the radio as the da-da-da-da, this is what's happening. And so she was a radio singer.
And there was a wonderful soundtrack on the radio that you made. So it kind of would whoop, whoop, it would go off into a news from Ethiopia.
Yeah,
It would be coming in. So when you were doing that piece, and I'm thinking of some of Meredith's other works, Specimen Days, pieces that would really kind of address kind of historical fears, wrongs, looking into the present now, where you were making work in which I think you expressed it once, those were almost like expressing a problem, and now it's like a paradigm. You're presenting a paradigm.
I'm trying to present an alternative, because
Right.
so I consider that my apocalyptic theory. But then there was a certain point where I just thought, I think art should be useful, and there are some people that are born to make political work, but it better be good art. But I think that I realized, well, most of the people that would come to my work knew what the problem was, but what would be an alternative? How would I make sacred space with all of us here together? How would I make a kind of prototype of the generosity and luminosity, kindness and cooperation of human beings? Without being sappy about it, but still, the behavior. I hope that you'll see this if you come on Thursday. I think the content of the concert is the way that Katie and Allison and I relate to each other. The music is just the means.
You are a community.
It's like the armature.
Yes.
But the way if one of us is having one little difficulty, we're pulling the other two. So you see that's what we're trying to communicate, that we can live this way without competing with each other, without hurting each other, without being inconsiderate and insensitive, but being generous and kind is a possibility.
And I think you've said of yourself, I've made work about things that you can't make work about. Impermanence. Mercy on behalf of nature. And I love, you talked about doing, your own research or reading or looking at the moment where things inspire you to start something. And you were talking about reading Siddhartha Mukherjee's, it was like a history of cancer, and you were looking at cellular activity, and wasn't that one of the inspirations for cellular songs?
Well, it was a kind of odd thing because I'm always working, every day I'm at the piano or doing something, and I was working on these little 3 a cappella pieces that you'll hear on Thursday. They're very intricate, tiny little pieces, and very intricate. And I go in when I work and try to go to beginner's mind as much as possible with not any expectation at all, but just play, be playful. And so these were coming up. And then I started reading this book, Siddhartha Mukherjee's The Emperor of All Maladies, and it was basically about the history of cancer. But what was interesting to me was when he would say what a normal cell was and how interdependent our cells are. Like within our cells are all these billions of processes that work together. In our bodies, there's billions of cells that work together. And so I thought, wow, that's such an interesting metaphor of what a society could be. And then I realized, I think these songs are very much like about the motor of cells moving around. So, it's just this very instinctive process. It's like being a detective. And when you have one clue, you just try to follow it. And I'm always terrified before I make any piece, but when I get that little clue, then I start getting interested and the fear goes away.
Like that, what the piece wants to do?
Yeah, listen to the piece.
Listen.
What do you want? Make yourself known, please. Please, make yourself known.
Well, I think one of the actual etymologies of
embodiment. A novel there, girl.
I know, I was having fun. But one of the earliest etymologies of embodiment was from the 1540s, referring to the act of investing a soul or a spirit with an animate form.
Can you say that again?
Referring to the act of investing a soul or a spirit with an animate form. And
isn't the soul animate to start out with?
For some. But you're investing, you're giving voice to things that we don't think have voices.
Yeah.
Like cells, like creatures, like nature. Like when Meredith did a piece called Songs from the Hill. This is an earlier piece where you sat in the landscape in New Mexico for a while and you just listened. Mm-hmm. And didn't these songs come to you that way?
Yeah, it wasn't trying to reproduce what I heard, but it was more like trying to essentialize the feeling of what I heard. Not like that I was going peep, 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 boop, 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 or imitating what I was hearing. Although I was quite shy, like singing in nature, to be totally honest, but it was more feeling the magic of that place and the essential, what were those spirits of that place? Yeah.
And you became those spirits when you performed. It was quite remarkable. So what is it that, I'm thinking about you using your exploration of the voice, and when, a lot of singers think, I can be so expressive because I can use words.
Yeah.
And you've chosen, or you've explored, the
wordless language.
But what is it about human utterance itself that interests you?
Well, I think I don't use words in my singing because I came from dance. And I trust nonverbal communication as much as I do love to talk. Anybody that went to Sarah Lawrence, one of the great things about Sarah Lawrence is you do learn to talk. I don't remember much I learned there, but I do enjoy talking because you have to meet your teacher one-on-one every week, so so that's part of it, and it's a seminar school. But I think that I was always very interested in ancient utterance, like what was it before words came in, and there are very interesting studies about it. Like Oliver Sacks did a great book who was a wonderful neurologist. I don't know if you ever heard of him. There was a film called Awakenings about him. There's a TV show now that's sort of supposed to be based on his work. What is it called? Oh, I can't remember. But anyway, so he said that when words came, that neurologically, the human beings were born with perfect absolute pitch. This is what they found out. But when words came in, they lost that capacity. And now absolute pitch is where I don't have it. I have very good relative pitch, but Allison has absolute pitch. So that means if you say the words you want to hear a C, she can sing it. It does cause problems if the rest of us are singing flat, and she's got to adjust. But apparently words came in and the brain changed. But I'm very curious about how do people communicate before that time.
And yet there are certain songs where words come in, and as we talked about, they're like a litany. They're like...
when I use words, I think of them as another sculptural element. Like if I use words, I mostly do lists. So my newest album is called Sell Your Songs, and I'll sing this song, Happy Woman. It's a list of these qualities of women have, and this one that we want to play for you is this really, I'm also going to sing this on Thursday. It comes from Education of the Girl Child, and it's called A Tale. And it's in this opera about women, kind of women as mythic group, because in our society we have or in our historical society, we have the Knights of the Round Table, we have the Seven Samurai, we have the Magnificent Seven, groups of men. But the women, when you get women together, they're sitting and having coffee. So I was thinking, well, wait a minute, this is half the human race, so we need to have heroines, and explore that. So, but in this piece, it's a piece about 4 old women, and we're doing this little folk dance. And death comes in 3 times. And she takes one of us away, and then we're like, oh boy, phew, we're still alive and everything. And then she takes us one by one, and the last one does a kind of inventory of all the stuff she still has, hoping that death won't take her away, and then death does take her away. So this is me as an old woman, but I was 27 when I was singing this. But
I realize, I don't know if I'm signed in, but let's see.
well, you'll hear it on Thursday.
And when you do this song in different countries, you always learn it in the language.
I always learn, but it does have words, so I do it in the language where where I am. So I've done it in Korean, Russian, Cantonese, Italian, Portuguese, oh my gosh, Moroccan.
I just found your notes in Japanese.
Japanese.
If you need them back, they're in a folder.
Watashi ni wa mada te ga aru, watashi ni wa mada atama ga aru. I still remember those old ones.
Well, while Deborah's finding it, I'm thinking about Girl Child. You've worked with some of the same cast over time with that piece, and you've done it at different ages. Mm-hmm. What is it like to work with they're like family to you, these friends. They're friends in the piece and they're friends in real life. What is it like to do it at different periods of your life? Does it feel really different?
Well, when I was 27, I did the solo part of Education of the Girl Child. I started as this really old woman, and little by little I worked my way to a middle-aged woman, then I worked my way to a young woman. Why I was thinking about what it would be like to be 85 or 90 when I was 27, I have no idea. And then we did it when I was more like the middle-aged woman, and now I am like the old woman. And now I remember what it was like to have the young woman's voice. So, it's interesting.
Got it?
No, that's not it.
Is that?
No. That's Dolman music. You want the tail.
The tail.
Oh, the tail.
And we're going to have some time for you guys to ask questions.
Yeah.
So
Please take that off.
think of your questions. Meredith, you mentioned fear. How do you still feel afraid when you start
Terrified.
something? Really? And then you kind of talk to yourself. You talk yourself down. You let the piece
If I
talk.
find something interesting, I start getting curious. I think curiosity is a wonderful antidote to fear.
There we
are.
go.
Point it up, please. Can you put it on the system? No, it's Louise. Tech.
Well, you guys you'll get to hear it.
Yeah. Could you turn it off, please? Thank you.
Sorry, guys. I am not on Spotify. I thought I was.
That's okay. It's okay. You guys, you'll hear the real thing. But one of the
You
things
can hear it on Spotify. It's called The Tale.
But one of the things that the woman that's left with is her she still has her anxieties.
No, I still have my memory.
You still have your memory, but
I still have my mind.
But doesn't she also have her anxieties? Or did I make that up?
No, you made that up.
I still have my anxieties. Lloyd and I go around saying that all the
Well,
time.
I go, I still have my mind, and then the other two are like, oh, right.
Right. We'd like to give you some time to ask some questions. Would anyone like to venture a question for Meredith? Yes? Can you?
Do you want the
Microphone.
Yeah.
We're still working on it. We're almost done. We're getting to the resolve.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Hi, thanks so much for being here. Another person that performs in similar ways with groups of singers, kind of non-verbally, is Bobby McFerrin. And something he uses that you use also is joyful humor. I was wondering how you think people take singing so seriously. How do you see humor as a tool in an ensemble to make music together?
Well, I did a duet with Bobby, in the late 80s, because he came to a concert of mine, and he left this great singing message on my machine, like, I like that piece. I like that piece at Carnegie Hall. And so that's how we made a connection. And I'd been working a long time before I heard his first album, but I was, thought, wow, this guy is wonderful. And so I called him back and said, you want to do a duet? So we did a duet called Duet Behavior. And it was really funny to work with him because I improvised to get my material, but then I really work hard on essentializing it. And he does not want to do anything but improvise. So we improvised for 3 days, and we were having a great old time. And I was thinking, okay, this is a good start. And he said, see you next November. This was June. And I was like, what? See you next November? But we ended up compromising. I went out to California, we did some rehearsing, and I had made a piece that I wanted to hock it with him. That's where you do one note and the other person does another note. And he did not want to rehearse that much, but he did give in, and we ended up singing the piece in unison, which was very cool. And then I gave in and said, okay, let's do a piece called Clean Slate, which we'll completely improvise, but you got to start. And then we just had a good old time. So I think humor is everything to me. I've always loved humor in my work, even if I'm making a very, like Quarry has these buffoon kind of dictators in it before the real scary dictator comes in. And I always feel that, Shakespeare does that. In a tragedy, you always have that moment of release. And I've always loved humor. It's very important in any piece that I do, to have that within it. It's a really good, I think laughter heals everything. Laughter is cosmic. Laughter is cosmic. Well, I would say art heals everything. And I would say music heals everything. And I would say movement heals everything. And I would say that all of you young people, please give out to the world what you love. We just have to have love in this world. We have plenty of hate. It's easy to hate. But you've got to really work. You've got to be a warrior to love. And I mean warrior of love. You've got to have the army of love. That's what my classes are called, the army of love. From Van Jones's great article, when we will not mention his name, was elected in 2016. And he said we needed an army of love. And that doesn't, and I'm not trying to say what your politics can be. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that whatever is happening in the world, you can see that there's a lot of sadness and suffering. And, however we can get our love out, that's really important. And I think humor is a great way. So go to it, kids. Tally-ho. Follow your dreams.
I think I have it.
Never mind. Really, please, let's just go on.
Another question? One over there.
Is that it?
Stop.
It's okay, Deborah.
Please stop.
Question?
So when you were talking about your emergence in your work, you made a distinction between some of the artists who you referred to as not theatrical and you as theatrical.
I mean, Dick Higgins was theatrical in his own way. It's just a very different sensibility is what I'm trying to explain. Like, I think there are different ways of dealing with performance. I was in some of his pieces and I loved them. I loved them. This piece called Celestials that we did in a boxing ring was a beautiful piece. But they were really trying to work with ordinary, what I would call ordinary magic. And I was trying to work with transformation. I would say that's a good way to say it. Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay.
There?
Hello. Thank you so much. I wanted to pick up on something you were talking about earlier as when you were saying that you,
Mike?
when you're approaching composition or... Thank you.
Thanks.
I wanted to pick up on something you were talking earlier about sort of listening for what a piece needs or for what it brings to you. And it struck me, I've been very lucky to work with Anaya Lockwood quite a bit, and something that she has told me, she's a composer.
Who is that?
Anaya Lockwood. She's a New Zealand-born but now American composer who works a lot with acoustic ecology and field recordings. And she often has said to me that she listens for what a sound needs, and it struck me that it was very similar.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's Ania. I couldn't hear that. Ania Lockwood, yes.
Sorry, it's the accent.
Yes, I knew her. Wonderful person.
Yes, and the thing that also strikes me, in addition to that similarity, is that even though the content of your works might be quite different, both of you use silence and space really beautifully.
Definitely.
And when you were talking about sort of essentializing a piece back down from an improv foundation, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about how you might know when a piece is finished, or how you might, because that sense of space is so apparent, and it's clear that you have a very intuitive sense of that at some
That's a
level.
beautiful question. I'm not sure that I ever know that, because I always wonder that about painters, like how do they know not to do that last stroke that ruins everything they had before? I think the beauty of live performance is that in a way it's never finished. Like, I think a form makes itself known. But I still, to this day, I'll be singing something from Songs from the Hill Will I Owe. You could hear an album of, a record of me singing it in the 1970s, and you'll see the form is pretty much the same, but I still have places where I can play. It's like a tree that has branches, and if I am going out to one branch and that branch is full of energy in the moment, I have the freedom to play with that and come back to the trunk and then go to the next branch. It's harder to do that with groups, and it's very hard to do that with instrumentalists. And could you?
Sorry, that was a mistake. Honest.
I think that's more difficult in the forms, like with an orchestra or something like that. There have been times where I finished the piece and then we worked, performed it for many years and realized that we had gone off course and I had to come back, especially when we record. But I do think the beauty of live performance is that the first time you perform it, it's like a baby, and then you find out what it is. And then it's organic, so it does grow and develop, and that's the beauty of it, in the way that I think about music.
Do you keep all these, not all the pieces are kept in repertory, right?
Right, they're not.
They're not,
There's no
but the
way.
music is, right? The music-
What do you mean by that?
Well, the music, you can go back to any song from any piece
Yeah.
and work with it. If the staging is not there, but the music is something that you've made through time.
Yes.
You can go back to.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
But one of the things that happens to me, my frustration is, I'll be working on a piece and I'm just singing, especially when I'm doing solo pieces, and I have all these beautiful nuances that I found, and I can't get them back until I've done it many, many times, and then finally I get back to where I started. So it's kind of a circular process, I think. Yeah.
Anyone else?
I had a quick question, Meredith. So, was dance your first, or was music your first?
As I say, I came from a musical family. I would say that music was my first language, but I was working with Dalcro, so I thought I was going to be a dancer.
Right.
Mhm.
So my question is, you're in college and you're studying dance.
I was in the dance department
Yeah.
and the
And
voice department.
so what allowed you to set? Because dancers are non-speakers,
Right.
Well, I mean, no, but in the training, right, you're just.
Don't take that, kids.
But in the classical form, right, in the classical form, don't speak, you're dancing, that's your instrument. So my question is, when did you, decide, dance is my number one, music is my number one? What inspired that shift, especially when the kind of music you wanted to make wasn't really out there?
I never thought of it in those terms. I always thought of it as one. I never thought of my, people go, how do you do music and movement and then you do these visual things and you do films and blah, blah, blah. I think of it just as one. And that every time you make a piece, you figure out what that piece is telling you your medium is going to be. Now, music is definitely the river of my life. I work on music all the time. It would rarely do a piece that doesn't have music in it. But in terms of what else it needs, it's, I have to wait and wait and wait, and sometimes I make the piece and then figure out what the form was. Example was I was making a piece called The Politics of Quiet in the 1990s. And I came into rehearsal with a lot of the music already, finished, not finished, but in a form enough that I could offer it to my ensemble. We tried everything but the kitchen sink, images, characters, this, that. It did not want that at all. It wanted the music. It wanted very geometric kind of patterns. It wanted, the content was almost like a village of human beings, and that was it. And then afterwards, when I finished it, I realized, I think this is like a kind of nonverbal oratorial piece. So I love these ideas of making these new forms between the cracks of the art forms.
That's a really important phrase for this young crew.
Yeah, between the cracks is a theme that you
Well, it's so exciting, that's where I find my, it's so exciting.
And you've really come up, I was looking at the names of pieces, like such and such, a theater cantata, such and such, that they've come up with their own genre, their own,
Yeah.
I love that. Thanks. Would anyone else like to throw a question in here?
How many people of you are coming from the dance department?
Yeah, curious. And
Music?
visual arts?
Visual arts? Ooh. Well, theater? Not artists in other disciplines, like science or other disciplines? Cool. Visual arts, listen, I think that you guys, you were a big inspiration to me. Because in the visual arts, here's the thing. In the performing arts, there was a split between studio and creator, right? The interpreter and the creator. So everybody that was studying piano or violin was not necessarily being taught how to think to make something. They were taught to, which is a wonderful thing to be an interpreter, don't get me wrong. To be have a life as an interpreter is an incredibly creative life. But the thing about the visual art world is it was just taken for granted that you were going to find your own way of doing things, period. A very dear friend of mine is Bruce Nauman. We've been friends for years, and our work is very different, almost like the medium is a message and they're quite different. But what I always love about him, and that we talk about it a lot, is I can use him as an example of here's a guy who, if the concept is a dance piece, I'm going to make a dance piece. If I'm going to make a sound piece, I'm going to make a sound piece. If I'm going to make a sculpture, and he can't figure out what to call himself, and I can't figure out what to call myself. So that's very inspiring. And in the visual arts world, it's no big deal that you are a painter and that you do drawing, Leonardo da Vinci, you're a sculptor. But in the performance world, you're made to feel bad, because you're doing music and you're doing movement and you're doing theater. Only in the Western European tradition. If you're in Bali, the more things that are in one body, you're honored for that. If you're in Chinese opera, if you're an actor, singer, director, and mover, you're honored for that. So I feel like that's another thing that I learned very young when I was in my 20s. I want to do this as a way of also a socially oriented offering to show people that our world is perceptually rich. Why do we have to limit ourselves to one form or another? But you have to be good in all the things that you do. And so you have to work harder. That's the thing.
Work harder. Yes.
Thank you, Meredith.
You're welcome.
I'm a visual arts major, and your 16mm earrings really spoke to me. As a young woman in trying to make a name for herself in the art world, your work is very coming of age. What was the most challenging part of being a female in New York City, coming up in the art world, working with like Dick Higgins and everyone?
the guys.
Yeah, it's a bit intimidating. So, any advice?
So my
and
question
challenges?
to you is, do you feel that in your personal life as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I did too. So it was really hard. I mean, I feel like I was made to feel like I was a bad woman because I had my own vision. It was pretty painful. I believed it too. I believed it. I'm getting a little teary talking about this, but so I say to you, you have the right to do your vision, and you have the right to find somebody that, male or female or bi or trans or anybody, who will affirm that you have the right to do your life and to have your vision. You have that right, because it's still going on to this day. I'm still in reviews being, the review is what I'm wearing, not like the seriousness of my work. So, it's just something we got to work on. And I think it's changed and open. I think it's easier now. There's a lot of strong women, and I think that it's not as hard as it was when I was coming up.
That reminds me of a question, if I can.
And I just want to say one other thing, make a name for yourself. That I would be very suspicious about a little bit at your point in your life. The most important thing is you take your time before you're under the pressure of making a name for yourself, that your goal is to find yourself. The most important thing is that there's only one of you in the universe. And your job, and it's a full-time job, is to find your way and only your way that only you can give the world. And that's not to say that you're not trying to make a name for yourself ultimately and make an offering, but make a contribution. But there's a difference between aspiration and ambition. Aspiration is what you can give, and ambition is what you can get. And this world is so oriented towards the business and what you can get and the make name for yourself and all that to survive. And I'm not saying it's easy, believe me. I really have so much, listen, my loft was $75 a month. I could model for artists and teach children's dance and music classes and get by and do my work. So I'm not saying it's not a challenge and you got to find your way. But the most important thing is to just listen to what you have to say. And then find your ways of snaking through this crazy world. And then you will make a name for yourself. And it won't be too early where you can't handle it. I was always very suspicious and cautious. Because you just get eaten up alive, and then you have to do the same thing over and over again for the rest of your life. It's like, the hamburger machine. You're like ground up, let's get the new one. My mother was a commercial singer, and I saw, and I don't know, if you ever get, if you're getting, should I talk about Monk in Pieces?
Sure.
There's a film about my work in my life that's on Amazon Prime. It's called Monk in Pieces by Katie, who's singing on Thursday. Her husband did it. And there's a part where I talk about my mom, who was a commercial singer, and then at a certain point, and she was the it girl, for a year or two, and then she wasn't. And she wasn't getting work. In the last 40 years of her life, she was terribly depressed. So you want to think the long range. And if you stick to your guns and really find your own thing, you are going to make a name for yourself, and I know you will. Yeah. It's beautiful.
Coming up out of this question, I'm thinking about your boldness, though, Meredith, as you were a woman coming up in New York. What gave you the idea that you could ask? I know you were talking, but what gave you the idea that you could ask for the Guggenheim?
I thought I'd die if I didn't get the Guggenheim. So I had just done this thing at the Billy Rose Theater. It was this avant-garde. I did not want to be there. And there's a picture of me in the New York Times where I'm like, she does not want to be there. You can tell. And I was called a disgrace to the name of dancing in the New York Times. So I was like,
congratulations.
Yeah.
That's really something.
But then what happened was that right after that, I was able to do my first really big site-specific work at the Museum of Natural History at the Smithsonian. And then I was like, wow, this is where I want to be. And so I wanted to do it in New York, and I wrote these outrageously brazen letters to all these museums.
I hope they're preserved somewhere. They're really would be good for the archive.
You know, I was so insecure and so scared and so weirded out, but I also had chutzpah, I have to say.
Yeah.
I mean, what nerve writing to all these museum directors like, I have to do my piece in your museum.
I mean, 75 performers and a woman on a
Well, it
horse.
turned out that there was a curator that knew my work,
Oh.
and she was the one that made it happen. I had to sign these papers that all of us had to wear rubber-soled shoes, and we would pay for any injuries, and on and on.
I mean, you all know the spiral structure of the Guggenheim, so Meredith made a piece that utilized the whole structure of, with performers. It's really wild. I look at pictures and like, how did you make this
Well, that's what
happen?
I look at. I go, how did I do that?
What year are we talking about?
1969.
So that was pretty,
Ancient days.
yeah,
I was 26, I think.
chutzpahs for sure.
Unfortunately, I think we have time for one more question, and then we're going to have to wrap it up because the students in this class like to end class on time. And we have to do attendance, which takes a few minutes. So I think we have time for one last question, if anybody's burning, or any desire to ask a question.
Thank you, you've been a great audience.
Katie has, Kate has one.
Hi, thank you for being here. It's very nice to meet you.
Thank you, it's my pleasure.
One thing you said really caught my attention when you said that you think art should be useful. I think that's a really interesting statement. How do you go about making art have this kind of statement and use for the world and impact on society while preserving your own artistic integrity and being bold how you are and wanting to get your message across, but having to navigate a world that maybe doesn't always want to get that message across?
That's a beautiful question. I mean, I ask myself that all the time. I think that I just have to keep on reaffirming this sense that, as I said, doing something that offers an alternative to, in other words, my work is not like an escape. You can sense that the artist is very aware of what's going on in the world, that it's a response to the world. So it's not like tweet, we're just gonna, pretend and everyone's gonna have a good time. No, because you always sense that the work has that other layer of responding to, what's going on in the world. And the darkness and sadness that we're living in now has recurred over and over in history. It's a recurring thing. So there was a time when I was working on cellular songs that I was saying, is it too abstract? Is it too, does it seem like it's not dealing with the pain of what's happening right now? And then I realized that I went to the Whitney Biennial that year, and I realized there were artists that were kind of working with a branch with two main, I was a tree with two main branches. There were some that were doing overtly political work, which is very useful, but one of the things I have a problem with that work is that when you look at it, when you go home, what do you do with it? You're just like depressed, and what do you do with it? And then there was another whole group of artists that were working more, I could say, in timeless, a more spiritual realm, you could say. And I think that that's what I feel, and I ask myself this question, Katie, every day. Like, what, is this useful that what I'm doing, is it enough? And I feel like, however you can send your love out, we have to have faith also. There's a sense of faith about this. That sending out that energy is actually like throwing a little stone into a pool and the resonance is going out. You may not know that, but it is. And if all of us are doing that in our little ways, we might make a difference. And I hope that that's useful. But it's a wonderful question, and you should keep asking yourself that. There's a wonderful political piece, though, that I would love to tell you about that I hope that you all get a chance to see. It's Steve McQueen, who did 12 years as a slave. And he's really gone back to, this is almost like an installation piece. It's 4 hours long, and it's called Occupied City. 4 hours long. I remember the first 5 minutes I thought, I'll never make it. But it was like talk about transformation. It's basically about World War II and Amsterdam. But it becomes something that's so beyond what a film is that you could have heard a pin drop in that theater for 4 hours. So people are doing, more overtly political work that is really strong work. And you just have to find out what is it that you need to say, what's your means. And ask questions, all of you, throughout your lives. Questions are very important. Curiosity is very important. And learning is very important. It's just wonderful to learn. It keeps you young.
And on that
And I'm
note,
very old.
we've been embodied a long time. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Deborah.
Really, thank you so much, Meredith. Thank you so much, Louise. That was very inspiring, and I hope for all of your students and others that it was inspiring. And don't forget to do the attendance quiz. It's open now. And I just want to say that Meredith has a video on that's available for viewing in the Contemporary Arts Center in the Claire Trevor School of the Arts. And it's a large-scale video installation called Rotation Shrine. And it's open tomorrow from 12 to 2, and tomorrow on Thursday 12 to 2, and also on Thursday 6 to 8 p.m. before the performance. And if there's any students in the house that want, I think I have like 6 tickets left to the performance. So if anybody wants to come for extra credit, I'd be happy to give you extra credit. But that's the reality. Thank you so much, Meredith. Thank you so much, Louise, and enjoy.